Hello, my fellow comic book people. Today I come to you with a review of Alex and Ada. It was all published, all three volumes, I guess, they're published in sort of like 2015, started in 2013, finished in 2015, by Jonathan Luna, who did the illustrations, letter, design, story, and script, and Sarah Vaughn, who is just story and script. And I'm sure there's some interview somewhere that tells you how they broke this all down, but that is how they list themselves at the front of this, and I try and go into these things as cold as possible and try and figure out this is what it did to me kind of way. So yes, it's a science fiction story, kind of a near future. There are self-driving cars. People have sort of implants in their head so that they can give thought commands. They can do kind of speech. They can use it to do speech commands, like make a phone call, but just in their head. There's a little kind of like a little hovering little helper robot who does the kind of housework around the house. And there are androids, full humanoid creatures. Some of them are just stripped, like just metal, and others of them look exactly human. That's Alex, and that is the what's going to be the computer at the. Going to be the computer is the android of the story, the her of the story. So but in this world of technology, there's, of course, as always with new technology, there's fears, there's concerns, especially with something like androids, especially since what has happened is that, as we see, as the Alex wakes up alone in this kind of very kind of empty house, and he's just giving thought commands to open stuff, and it's all just like, if this was a movie, it would be all completely silent except for him like looking at stuff, and then, yeah, I'll take that shirt. But he's not even saying anything. It's just like, and it's like, stands at the toilet, thinks, flush, and it flushes. So it's a very kind of interesting start of like, okay, this is the world. And he's watching the news, which is kind of a hollow, thing at the kitchen table. It's not like an actual screen. It's, a physical TV screen. It's just a projected screen or something like that. He watches the news, and they're talking about how, yes, one android did become self-aware, and there was this incident where 34 people were killed. And so there was this AI Restrictions Act set in place to basically make sure that no other androids would get sentience, because it was seen as this danger to humans. But people are like still worried because androids are all over the place. They're a major part of the society. So especially the first book, it does a really good job of sort of building the society. And indeed, as he's driving to work, you are walking to, and kind of as he gets out of his self-driving car, you see like, people with placards of like, freedom for robots, and robots deserve rights and stuff like that. So it gives you a good setup of this world. And into this world, as I mentioned already, is Alex, who has woken up alone in this very kind of what looks like a full house. It's not like a little apartment of a single person. This is like a full house. He's like, he's obviously very depressed, and indeed he gets to work, and his coworker says, "Oh, like, yeah, you've been, Claire left you, what, 6 months ago?" And he says, "No, it was 7. It's like, and there's the little nuances there of, yeah, he's very much keeping count, and he's obviously very much stuck in this world. And this is the day before his birthday, just to make things that extra bit depressing, but also we're going to get into kind of birth and stuff like that in this book about androids, and androids gaining sentience. So his grandmother, who's this kind of wealthy, and it's funny how the elderly can sometimes be the biggest embracers of technology. She has her own. Grandpa died, but she didn't want to be with anyone else. But she got this young male appearing android as her companion, Daniel, she discomforts poor Alex, her grandson, by talking about how, like, oh, I have great sex with this android, and like, it's also just companion and kind of like a care. You can see it like it's kind of a caregiver as well, which is very much, you can see a thing. I think I've read things about like Japanese society about there being so many kind of the elderly and wanting to have companions, and that actually being a driving force. Maybe not, sex for the elderly in Japan, but the idea of like companionship and being this very kind of being an isolated, self-isolated society, which I think we can kind of sympathize with here in North America as well. And all other places in the world, we're getting more and more isolated. It's like having that companionship. It's like, oh, well, you actually create a companion thing. And he comes, so he's talking to her thing. Grandma buys him a sexy woman robot, as seen on the cover of the books. Actually, I love that. Let's do a little visual thing there. I just love that cover of, oh, it's almost like, you know, he's Alex in his office gear. It's funny. It's like that's totally a workman office guy's gear, and you have the Tanaka X5 standing in what is almost looks like kind of a bridal thing of like, oh, this is the marriage, but it's a packing thing with the T of the Tanaka thing. And she runs on this female appearing android runs on Prime Intelligence, which is the big company is Prime. They also do the implants into the head, Prime, which is Prime Wave. And so yeah, she's bought him this robot, and he's like, Grandma, why would you do that? Why would you do that? This is like really gross. This is like really disgusting. And indeed, he shows it to friends, and like, you know, one friend, Isabel, is like, oh, what are your measurements? And they're like, you know, 36, 24, 36. And she's like, yeah, of course they are. And that's another one of those, I love the little details of, like, you know, we're not going to say, wow, this is a sexist kind of like, yeah, you're going to buy yourself a sexy woman robot, or your grandmother's going to buy you one. So there's, you know, it's really good at kind of accreting all these details and all these different attitudes of people. And also, because this is, you know, a science fiction story with robots, when he turns on the robot, the android, she says, I will gladly do anything you ask, as long as it does not harm humans, animals, or property. I will avoid putting myself in danger unless it is to protect you, or by your command. Which and she also has a T logo on her wrist, which she's not allowed to remove or conceal. And she can't handle money, and she can't helm a vehicle. And finishes off with, I am now in your hands. Please take care of me. Which anyone in the science fiction interest in science fiction, this goes back to Asimov's The 3 Laws of Robotics. Isaac Asimov, the old-time sci-fi guy, the originator, he did iRobot and all that, the actual stories, not the Will Smith movie. And so he formulated something called, maybe him and his editor, John W. Campbell. You can learn all about that in a past review of mine about Astounding, which is the 3 laws of robotics, which are: 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human to come to harm. 2, a robot must obey orders given by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law of harming human beings. And 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. And there's also additions to those laws, including a 0 kind of big meta law and other things. Also, it's interesting that there's been additions or different thoughts in this. One of the ideas I saw online was something of Mark Rotenberg, of the idea of transparency, of like, you should be able to know that what you're speaking to is a robot, and a robot should be able to there should be a right to be like, explain why it's made a decision it's made, which you kind of gets into the algorithm idea of, you get kind of like all these like the YouTube algorithm of why do they push what they do at you, or, you know, there's a lot of algorithms run our world. The robots have already taken over, but a lot of times that's proprietary information, so we're not actually given access to, well, why are these decisions made for us? Why these decisions that make us are such a thing? But that's a tangent. So yes, we get the 3 laws, and Alex ends up naming the robot. I'm going to call her from now on Ada, which Ada immediately went, Ada Lovelace, who with Babbage, of course I don't have any of her information here, Charles Babbage came up with the Analytic Engine, basically the start of computers. mathematician. She was a mathematician. She worked with Charles Babbage, who was also a English mathematician. Ada Lovelace, also the only legitimate daughter of Lord Byron. And gives you an idea of the time period. And she's like credited as like basically the first programmer and the first person to actually come up with the kind of the idea of an algorithm. And is sort of one of the first people who went, this isn't just an adding machine. This has got like a lot of further applications, which is where you get the basis for a lot of our how we have ended up developing computers as we go along. So this is a book that definitely has got like, you know, going back to the 40s, but also going back to like, I think it's the 1800s of the ideas of human beings and computers. So this is very much a book about, because as it turns out, I think as you can get the thing, one of the things of Alex considers, I'm going to return Ada. I'm going to send her back. This is too gross. And he's going to do it. And indeed, the guy comes to pick her up, and he says, well, have you unlocked it? Like, have you tampered with the thing? Because a great way of introducing the thing is people have been tampering. People have been unlocking, these, androids who, interestingly enough, come in what I have to say, Ada comes in a big box, which is like molded, form-fitted, very cool. Kind of reminds me of an iPhone box, or just like a phone box, of a cell phone box in general. There's like there's the echoes there of this is like your new phone, this is your new toy, and it's super cool. But you're not allowed, if you're an Apple person, you're not allowed to unlock your phone and tamper with the stuff. And indeed, Alex is one of the reasons that Alex is so unsatisfied with Ada is basically what in the truly grossest sense of what a perfect girlfriend would be, with basically she has no free will. She only wants to please Alec. She has no opinion. Everything that Alex thinks is right. She is a complete lump, which Alex, and see, there's the good thing of this book is Alex never at any point, his discomfort or whatever, he's never like, oh, I'm going to use this thing for, sex or anything like that. Which is, I think, a key thing for what comes later, is that he never crosses that line. Though it's one of these things of, you know, are you violating a vibrator by using it, because it doesn't have sentience? And indeed, Ada is sold to Alex or Alex's grandmother as something that this is something that doesn't have sentience. It won't. It's basically it's a toaster. It's a vibrator. But it turns out that the actual secret is, I think that this is mild spoilers, but this is just coming in the first volume if you don't want to know any more. It's like, wow, this is a good book, Alex plus Ada. It's also Alex plus Ada equals, or it's Alex plus Ada, like, carved into a tree, and it's a little heart. It's a romance. It's a science fiction romance is all I can put to that. So to skip to the spoiler is for just for the first book. And I mean, you really got to think, okay, we got 3 books, they're running on the final one. Okay, is that, surprise, surprise, if your android is running on prime intelligence, it actually is capable of sentience. But what's happened is, because of the scare, because of the AI Restrictions Act, because the company who created this intelligence, it's sort of like, I think of it as a positronic thing. It's like it's a complex interweaving of positronic being, positronic brain actually coming from Asimov. It's a complex interweaving of programs, algorithms, and stuff like that. And they couldn't just pull out the sentience capability of sentience. They could only just lock it away. So basically, all these millions upon thousands upon hundreds of thousands of androids that are walking around are indeed capable of sentience. It's just been locked away. So yes, check your sex toys from now on and make sure that they don't have some kind of super advanced technology that means they could have possibly have sentience and be experiencing all this stuff, even though not actually experiencing it, but recording it. Because indeed, Alex becomes dissatisfied with Ada and goes through a process to illegally get her unlocked and give her sentience. She wakes up and she kind of freaks out because she's had this big flood of basically everything since she's turned on gets flooded into her all at once. And I can't imagine if he'd been using her as a sex toy, which, let's just put it out there that, you know, you think about all these living dolls and stuff that get sold on the internet, they get sold as this. There's one reason why a lot of people are interested in a lifelike human android. It's because they want to have happy fun times with a lifelike human looking android. Yes, so, you know, that's human. That is human nature, good or bad, whatever it is there. He doesn't. And interestingly enough, one of his neighbors come by and is like, oh, wow, I like that one. Can I take it for a test drive? Which is like, wow, no, that's really gross. And this is actually at the point after Ada has actually been given sentience and is now can understand. And indeed, all those rules seem to go away. And it's basically she's running like a human being of a conscience of, oh, I'm hurting someone. Okay, I'm not going to hurt someone even though I was really angry. It's not like, oh, I must not because I have these slave-like commandments that make me behave. It's like, no, I have to have my conscience, which I guess means there's a possibility that I'm going to have an AI who is, you know, psychopathic, who is not, you know, just like human beings aren't. So indeed, and it's interesting because like it is very much framed as a civil rights or LGBT plus kind of quest for rights for androids, and indeed, like as Ada, you know, as they go through the book, like Alex is like, well, can I really love you as a, like, even after she gets sentience, it's like, well, it's like my grandmother bought you for me. And, you know, how can I enter into a relationship with you? And, you know, you're how old? Like, you're like a couple of weeks old. And she's like, look, you know, you have to if you respect me as a person, you're going to respect my choices, because she does, after she gets sentience, and has done some experiencing, I mean, not a ton, does some experiencing, decides that she actually would like to try being with Alex. You know, it's still one of those things of like, it's like the writers have done it in such a way that like he didn't want to do it. His grandmother bought it for him. It's almost like being born because, and indeed his grandmother has her relationship with Daniel, especially at the very kind of the further at the end of the book, is very much kind of a slave owner relationship, like of like what at the end of a slave, how a slave owner might treat a slave. So, but I mean, this is a created creature, and I don't know quite if it really maps all the way. I think it's more interesting as a kind of the civil rights thing. I kind of vacillate whether that's really a great metaphor there, just because it's like, you know, Black people or people who were enslaved, it's not like they didn't have sentience before, and then when you unlock them, they suddenly got sentience. It's like, no, they were sentient all along, whereas robots are like, basically, they are toasters. They are objects that don't have consciousness. Now, if you enslave them after they have consciousness, that seems to be a thing of I have trouble with. And I mean, they've written it in a certain way so that it like, oh, they did have sentience all along. It's like, but you know, people didn't know that. And I mean, maybe that's to kind of say, oh, well, how societies justify enslaving people is by saying, well, there are lesser people, and thus we feel justified in using them as objects, having them as property, having them as property, and then it's only through education, through civil rights, through the own advocation of the enslaved peoples that the owners become educated, and indeed maybe their children or their children's children kind of cast that aside. So I guess as a metaphor for that, you can have that. I mean, there's also just the sort of thing of the nature of human consciousness in here, of very much of, you know, when Ada challenges Alex, like, you know, oh, you know, well, you don't believe that you're not respecting me as a person to make my own decisions because I have programming, I have circuitry, I have whatever. But like, you know, you've got chemicals, you've got neurons firing, you've got all your hormones. Like, how is that not another form of programming? Why is your form of consciousness superior to mine? Why does that mean something I could hold you down? And I guess maybe that potentially is a question we might have in the future, but it's also just one of these things of, I think robots are just another way of us to think about human beings and, like, you know, how we put ourselves together and how we make the decisions we make. And indeed, by the end of this book, they've made a decision. Structurally, this book at the very end does kind of not quite the Harry Potter thing, but it does a thing of, it has one continuous time flow, and then there's a big jump to kind of wrap up the story. And there's a part of me, the Aristotelian unity of time, where, you know, everything should be just within one time period, nice and neat, that I sort of wanted. But I think it is necessary for the story, especially in a story where it's about societal change and you don't want to have, because, like, you know, as I was reading it through, it's like, oh God, this could be 50 issues long if we kind of filled in all those 25 years. That would have sucked. So yeah, and I guess the final thing is maybe just talking, hey, about visually. It is done in a very quite kind of, it's computer illustrated. It's a very simplistic style, which computer colored, minimalist style, which I have to say, you know, a lot of times that wouldn't appeal to me. I think it matches this story, it being kind of a science fiction, kind of rather, isolated world. It's one of these things, like, I can almost see these being like illustrations on how to run your Tanaka 5, X5, you know. So I actually think that the illustrations, the art, he calls it illustrations and thing, but so the illustrations kind of match the story, and they're being kind of sterile in that there's not like a lot of detail in these ultra mod sleek kind of near future world. It gives you this, it gives a sense of future world in this sense, whether that's what's intended or whether that's just the artist style. I think the artist style, Jonathan Luna's style, matches this kind of a story quite well. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Alex and Ada, whether it's Alex plus Ada equals ? Or Alex plus Ada heart on a tree. Oh, yes, because I'm a romantic. And maybe it's because I indeed, by the end, I was invested in both Alex and Ada. I believed the lie. I always remember a fellow who was talking about, like, oh, they gave their kid got a little toy, which was like a teddy bear, and the toy could talk, and it went to the child, I love you. And the guy the father was like, it's lying to you. It's like, that toy does not love you. That little toy's just been programmed to say that it does not love you. You know, I guess with Ada as a fictional character, as this fictional android who has consciousnness, and when she says that she loves Alex, I believed her, and I believed in Alex's love for her. Oh, by the way, Alex's name is Alex Wall, Wahl, which is a little bit of a groaner. Alex Wall, he's put up a wall for himself, which is, I thought was a little on the nose, but yeah. So those are now my final thoughts on Alex and Ada. Yeah, more videos later.